Oh, and Watch Dogs. The story is that the government had this surveillance thing going on, and you're living in a police state, and everyone's watching you all the time, or the government's watching you all the time, and you're supposed to be the freedom fighter, fighting against this oppressive surveillance government, right? And you do this, you fight them by having like special hacking tools that you use to hack into the government's network to disrupt their oppressive surveillance state. But what you actually can do is you just go around hacking everyone else, listening to their phone calls, stealing their money, reading their text messages. And like you would have this phone on, and you just walk down the street, and you just like steal people's money as you walk down the street. That's in the game. Like you're supposed to be the freedom fighter, fighting against the oppressive government. But what you actually do in the game is you just steal money from innocent people. That's the game. Who wrote that game? Who designed that? It's not even internally consistent. Like the logic doesn't make any sense. Like, are you the good guy or are you the bad guy? It's crazy. Watch Dogs is so bad. Actually unbelievable. Like, you're supposed to be fighting surveillance, but you tap into their phones, into other people's phones, and you listen in on their private calls and everything. No, you're the bad guy. Oh, and like the guy has a family too, and he's fighting the government, and he knows how dangerous that is. But he has a family, so he goes visit his family despite knowing that the government is after him. So then the government finds out where his family is and messes them up. And it's like, why'd you visit them? You know they know who you are. You know they're tracking you. And you supposedly care about these people. But you actively put them in danger by leading the government to your family. It doesn't make any sense. That game. All of it. Unbelievable. And then when the government messes up with his family, he gets angry at the government, even though he was the one who goes to his family as he's being chased by the government. What? How can you get mad? How can you get mad? Maybe I should, I don't know, if I upload my playthroughs of these bad games, it's gonna be so negative. Wackiness has gotta go. Thanks for the streams. Alright, see you later, Wackiness. Take care. And the thing is, like, it's possible to talk about bad things and bad people without trying to, like, without justifying them or giving them a pass. I mean, The Godfather is one of the examples I go to the most as being a story about bad people, but which, like, deals with them fairly, right? Like The Godfather, like, they all kill each other and nobody comes out ahead, really. Like, everybody kills everyone else. Everybody gets screwed. Like, it's just like a whole lot of bad, but it doesn't justify their bad behavior or anything. And in a way, there's like a sense of justice because the bad things eventually come back to the bad people, right? Eventually, their own family gets killed and all that. And in games like Watch Dogs, and like it talks about criminal gangs in Hong Kong, and it's like it's violent and there's like drug dealing and everything. But then you get into like gang wars and you lose your friends and all that, and it's like, alright, so it, like, you know, it talks fairly about, you know, how violence leads to more violence, and like the bad guys don't really win. But instead, like they lose through their own violent behavior, right? Like their friends and family gets caught up in it and then they all die. So there's a sense of justice. Even when the game is about you being a criminal, there is a sense of justice. And a game like Grand Theft Auto 4 is similar. Like, you're a criminal, but you're not really, like, you're trying to get away from the crime, but you get trapped in the same circles, and then your crimes get out of hand, and then you get betrayed by your girlfriend who turns out to be working for the cops. So that's cool. It's like, yeah, you're a bad guy, but then you get punished for being a bad guy, in a way. And your cousin's wife gets murdered in a drive-by shooting, and he's sad, and so like you lose family members because of the violence that you caused, or at least you contributed to. So it is quite possible to talk about bad things without condoning those bad things, you know what I mean? Watch Dogs though, and some of these Final Fantasy games, completely uncritical. Like a good gangster story is a fine line to tread. But it goes back to the old tragedy. If you study Greek theater, or I mean any good theater really, any good storytelling, like the tragic character who has a character flaw, or they make a bad decision and they face divine punishment. Like, stuff like that is pretty elementary storytelling, like, it's not complicated stuff. Even Borderlands 2. Like, Borderlands 2 is, in a way, messed up. Like, I acknowledge that, I like that game, but it's pretty messed up because everybody kills everybody. But you also lose things along the way. Like, Roland dies. And a number of other losses. So the story doesn't, like... I mean, it kind of turns violence into entertainment. But it doesn't really... like, it's not without costs. And it's honest about the costs of violence. Like these other games I've been talking about. Grand Theft Auto 4 and Sleeping Dogs. Like the costs of criminality and the costs of crime and violence. Other games can I think of, or other stories? I haven't played This Is the Police yet. I never really got into Papers, Please. Just thinking about these games with a message. I suspect Papers, Please is a little simplistic for me. Oh, the one... Spec Ops The Line is one of these games that has a good message. But which I considered not quite critical enough. I mean, I've uploaded a playthrough of that, so you can see what I mean if you watch it. Some games mean well, but still fail to do what they think they want to be doing. Because they don't quite take it to the next step. I guess what I really don't respect is the stories that don't understand themselves, or the storytellers who don't understand their own story. And part of that will be in the Final Fantasy X playthrough. Although that one's not too bad, but it's still like quite clearly not good enough. It's when the storyteller doesn't really understand what they're saying, or they're saying things in a way that actually goes against what they intend to be saying. Like, in a way, when a person deliberately says a terrible thing, I'm more okay with that than a person who thinks they're saying something okay but they actually aren't. I guess the way I would put it is, if a person wants to be evil, I respect them more if they're honest about their evil. Amnesia: The Dark Descent, I'm just thinking about that one. It's kind of like a redemption story, which it just kind of like skips past the evil bit and goes to the redemption bit. Amnesia: The Dark Descent, you start the game with amnesia, like you can't remember what happened, and then over the course of the game you discover that you did some pretty terrible things to innocent people in an attempt to stay alive and escape the monster that's coming after you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In a way, it dodges the problem of the player being a bad character, but having to make the player do bad things, because you don't actually do the bad things. You remember over time, you remember your character doing bad things before you start the game. That's kind of interesting. Interesting way to talk about morality without actually having the player do awful stuff against their will the way some other games have you do. But in a way, it's easy. It's a little too easy, I think. Well, I mean, not too easy, but it's easy to allow the player to experience the story of being a bad person without having to actually make any decisions on their own about what they want to do. So I think I respect Spec Ops The Line a little bit more. In several places in that game, the game sets you up so that you can very easily do atrocious things like murder civilians. Although, I mean, it's a bit hit and miss though. Some parts is good, some parts is not. So in one part of the game, like, the locals are lynching your soldiers because they think you're murdering their people, which you kind of are. So they're lynching one of your squad mates. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you try to save it, but you fail. And then the mob surrounds you. And they're gonna attack you as well. And you can either... I mean, you have a gun. All you have is a gun. I mean, this is a shooting game, so all you have... The only way you interact with the world is through your gun. So you have a gun, the mob is there, about to attack you. And you can shoot them, or you can fire into the air, and that will scare them away. And so the game doesn't tell you that, but it's like, alright, what do you do? Do you, like, the first shot, do you shoot straight into the crowd? Or do you first try to disperse them, scare them off by shooting in the air? Which I didn't do either, I shot at the ground. And the game interpreted that as though I shot in the air. Because then once I shot at the ground, my other squad mate shot into the air. And that dispersed the crowd. So it's like, it's a bit of lateral thinking. You have to kind of think outside the game a little bit to figure out, you know, what the morally correct thing to do is.